Chapter 2211. Daisy walked up to Cameron and sat beside her. "You're right." Cameron lowered her head as she sank deep in thought. "But your eldest brother didn't go with you, while your second brother accompanied you when you went to study in Yarramore?" She chuckled and replied, "Yeah, my eldest brother didn't go with us. He has been living in Staslo and only went to Yarramore to keep us company for a while after graduating." "I see." Daisy went closer to her and asked, "Why does it seem to me that you're interested in my brother?" Cameron was stumped and turned her head sideways. "That is impossible. I'll never be interested in your brother." Daisy decided not to expose her. She thought of something and pulled her phone out. "Let me show you some pictures." "What pictures?" asked Cameron. Daisy flipped through her albums and handed her phone to Cameron. Cameron took it, and she was shocked when she flipped through them. These are the pictures from when my eldest brother and I were kid celebrities. What do you think? Your eldest brother was a kid celebrity? He joined the entertainment industry because of me. Daisy rested her chin on her hand and asked, "Isn't he adorable?" Cameron did not say anything. She found it difficult to believe that Waylon was truly adorable when he was a kid. She was confident that she wouldn't be able to resist the urge to pinch his cheeks if she met him when he was a kid. She flipped to another picture and asked, "They're your second brother and eldest brother?" "Yeah. They look so much like each other. Nobody could differentiate them if they did not observe them closely. The three of them were triplets." Other than Daisy, Colton and Waylon looked exactly the same as each other. The only thing that could help people differentiate the two was that Waylon did not have a mole at the corner of his eye. Cameron saw another group photo, and she was completely stunned. Only then did she understand why some people would say God was unfair. "This is your family photo?" Daisy chuckled. "Well, not really. Other than my dad and mom, they're my aunt and uncle, and these two are Uncle Boucher and Aunt Barbara. They all look so pretty and handsome." Daisy's mother was an elegant beauty, while her father was handsome. Even her relatives and friends were of good looks. It seemed to Cameron that ugly people did not deserve to appear in this photo. Daisy found Yorick and Hector's photos. "This is Uncle Yorick and my mom's cousin." "Wait," Cameron said, "what kind of family are you from? Why are you all so good looking?" None of her family members or friends were ugly, and Cameron found it unacceptable. Daisy blinked and said, "I still have more. Do you want to see them?" She pushed her phone back and said, Nope. I have enough. I don't think I can take it anymore if you don't stop showing me your family members that look like celebrities. You and your family can form a group and join the entertainment industry already." Daisy put her phone back into her pocket and said, "I'll bring you to my mother when we're at Bassburg." She was stunned. "What? Why?" Cameron was going there for vacation, not to meet their parents. Daisy looked at her and replied, "Your father took great care of us when we were in the East Islands, so of course, you have to stay in my house when you're in Bassburg." Cameron asked, "Is it? Did I think too much?" Daisy nodded. She let out a sigh and replied, "But I didn't bring any gift with me. Will it be okay?" "Of course it'll be okay," Daisy squinted and replied, "My parents will be very happy as long as you show up in front of them." Nole said, "Like you." Daisy tugged at the duvet and asked, "What if it's a boy?" Nolace collected her hair that stuck on her neck and said, "As long as it's our kid, I'll like it. But I hope it's a girl." Daisy turned around to face him and replied, "Everyone wants a son to carry on the family business, but you just want a girl?" Chapter 2212. Even if Nolace did not care about it, he was the only son in the Knolls. What if his parents wanted a boy? Daisy started to make up those dramatic scenes where a rich family only wanted a boy inside of her head. Nolace caressed her cheek with his hand and chuckled. "Don't worry. My parents like girls very much. Just look at my mother. She likes you more than she likes me." Daisy lowered her head and looked at the knife wound on his body. She ran her finger over that bumpy scar, and she figured that he must have gotten it when he went missing. It hurts, doesn't it? Knollys grabbed her hand and kissed her forehead. This is nothing compared to giving birth. She was stunned for a moment. Then, she leaned on his chest and said, if you're not afraid of pain, I won't be either. He chuckled. I'm just worried that you might cry. Daisy was rendered speechless. Meanwhile, Cameron stayed in her cabin until the evening. She was starving, so she came out of her cabin. She followed the cabin number given to her by Daisy. Luckily, that cabin was not far away from hers. When she arrived at cabin number 3208, she pressed the bell. After a short while, the door was opened. However, when she saw the person who opened the door for her, she froze. This is your cabin? Waylon left 2 buttons on the collar of his shirt unbuttoned as he leaned against the door, slovenly. Of course, it is. Who did you think it was, Daisy's? Understanding soon dawned upon Cameron. It seemed to her that Daisy had tricked her. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and said, I'm looking for someone to go to dinner with. Since you're free, come with me. Waylon squinted and replied, but I just ordered my dinner. What should I do with it? Fine. I'll go by myself. Just when she turned around and was about to leave, Waylon grabbed her arm and pulled her into his cabin. By the time she came around to her senses, she was already sitting in front of the table. Waylon was not lying when he said he had ordered his dinner. However, it seemed to Cameron that the portion was a little bit too much for a single person. The food was warm, and it occurred to her that the dinner had arrived not long ago and that he hadn't had the chance to enjoy it yet. Waylon sat on the couch and said, I thought you were hungry. Well, dig in. I can't finish so much food myself anyway. Cameron glanced at him and asked, then why did you order so much food? He raised his eyebrows and replied, I like it. What a waste of food. Aren't you here now? So, it's not a waste of food at all. Cameron sat on the couch and picked up the fork. All right. If you insist. He chuckled. Help yourself. Cameron picked a piece of meat onto her plate and started eating. Waylon placed his hand on his forehead and watched as she ate. After a short while, she realized that she was the only one eating and asked, why aren't you eating? I'm not hungry anyway. He had eaten something this afternoon and ordered these dishes for her as he knew that she hadn't eaten anything yet, and he was certain that she would come to look for him. Cameron looked at the food, and something appeared in her head. You knew I'd come knocking on your door, so you prepared these for me? He laughed and replied, well, you can take it as I'm feeding a pig. Cameron put the fork down and said, are you saying that I'm a pig? The smile on Waylon's deepened. I didn't say that. You said it yourself. Wayne. Cameron grabbed the collar of his clothes. She did not know if there was a feud between her and the buttons on his clothes or not, but 2 buttons flew into the air after she clutched at his collar. Cameron was stunned as she stared blankly at the body before her eyes. Waylon lifted his head to look at her and said, why are you destroying my clothes again? Cameron hastily released her hand and averted her gaze. It's your clothes problem. Waylon fastened the buttons and replied, it's not that you haven't seen my body before. What's there to be embarrassed about? Chapter 2213. Cameron turned her head sideways and replied, I'm not. Waylon chuckled. This is new, Cameron. I thought you were used to seeing men's bodies since you have been staying under the same roof with other men the whole time. Cameron turned her head around to meet his gaze. Are you serious? I'm not embarrassed at all. I dare you to strip yourself naked. Waylon looked at her silently. With a triumphant grin on her face, Cameron went closer to him and said, I thought you wouldn't feel embarrassed at all, Wayne. But it seems like I was wrong. It's okay. I don't mind seeing it again. She was going to win against Waylon once, even if it meant throwing away her own dignity. Cameron coiled her finger around the button on his shirt. However, before she could do anything, he stopped her and narrowed his eyes. Are you serious about this? It went without saying that Cameron was just joking with him. After all, What if he was even more shameless than she was? She just wanted to put him in a tight spot. She wasn't going to strip him naked at all. She wanted to withdraw her hand, but Waylon grabbed it tightly. Cameron, even though you pretended to be a man for many years, do you really understand men? Cameron was stunned and did not know how to answer his question. Waylon stroked the back of her hand with his finger and took another step forward to shorten the distance between them even further. You think you understand men, but in reality, you don't. Those men you came across were either your opponents or comrades and subordinates. They didn't know your true identity and didn't dare to threaten you that way. But you're a woman now, and that's a whole different story. What's the difference? She asked blankly. Waylon dragged her into his arms, stunning her. She tried to struggle and free herself, but his hold was too tight. Suddenly, she felt something pressing against her thigh and froze. She looked at Waylon in disbelief and said, "You." Waylon secured her tightly in his arms and leaned over. Whispering into her ear, he said, "Now you know what the difference is? There are men who you can't tease." Cameron's face burned scarlet, and just when he released her, she took a step back hurriedly and left the cabin. Waylon placed his hand over his face and looked at the food on the table through the slits of his fingers. He just wanted to tell her that she shouldn't go around and say something like that to other men, but it seemed to him that he had scared her away. The ship arrived at Dillon's Pier the following morning. There were a few limousines parked near it. Quincy and the others who had returned one day early had come to pick them up. Daisy handed her suitcase to Knollys and turned around to look at Cameron and Waylon. She did not know why, but detected some awkwardness between the two of them. Knollys grabbed her shoulder and said, "Let's get into the car first." Before she could finish her sentence, Knollys glanced at them and interrupted her. "Your eldest brother will take care of her." Daisy and Knollys went into the car at the back. The bodyguard walked up to Waylon and said, "Young Master Waylon, this way, please." "Okay," he replied. After that, he handed this suitcase to the bodyguard and turned his head to look at Cameron. Cameron spun her head sideways and said, "I can carry it myself." She then carried her suitcase into the trunk. Waylon chuckled and went into the car first. Once Cameron got into the car, she pulled her phone out to make a hotel reservation. Just when she was about to make the payment, she found out that her card was frozen. She tried another 2 cards, but her balance was limited. She clenched her phone tightly and took a deep breath. She was confident that this must be her father's doing. She put her phone away and swore inwardly that she would get revenge on her father when she returned later. While they were on their way, Cameron sent messages to Mahina and Damien to ask for money. However, "Mahina, I'm sorry, miss. Mr. Southern Sr. told me that he'd dock my pay for 6 months if I lend you money. Damien, it's not that I don't want to lend you any money, but I can't. You know your father better than me, so just stay in Bassburg and play for a while. I'm sure they'll treat you well." Cameron put her phone down and leaned against the back of the chair. "This is one hell of a move, Dad." Cameron turned her sideways and looked at the man beside her. His eyes were closed. She stretched her hand forward and poked at his arm. Chapter 2214. Waylon opened his eyes slowly and turned his head around to look at her. Cameron forced a smile on her face and said, "Can I discuss something with you?" As if he could read her mind, he said, "Let me guess. You're going to ask me for money so that you can book a hotel?" Her smile disappeared as she replied, "Forget about it. I still owe you a lot of money, so I shouldn't borrow money from you anymore." Waylon handed an access card to Cameron. She was stunned and looked at him in confusion. "You can stay wherever you want in Bassburg." Waylon took in her surprised gaze and chuckled. "We won't let you stay on the street." When she did not accept the access card, Waylon continued. "If you don't want it, then I'm taking it back." "Wait." Cameron hastily took over the card and said, "I didn't say I don't want it." She needed to spend money to live in a hotel, so of course, she would settle down for anything. Besides, she didn't want to stay in someone else's home either. After all, not everyone was as friendly and welcoming as her father. What's more, she did not want to stay under the same roof as Waylon. However, what she did not know was that this was part of Waylon's plan to lure her into his trap. At the Goldman mansion, Maisie and Nolan were waiting for their kids in the living room. When they heard the footsteps, Maisie turned her head around, and Daisy walked into the living room. "Mom. Dad." With a smile on her face, Maisie rose to her feet, and Daisy approached her. She measured her up and down and said, "It's been almost 6 months since you went to the island. It seems like you've been eating well." Daisy replied, "Of course. Mr. Southern Sr. treated us really well." Nolan and Maisie then looked toward Nolace, Waylon, and Cameron, who were coming from the door. This was the first time the maids and butler in the living room met with Cameron, so they were curious about her. This was the first time Cameron met with the Goldmans as well. She looked calm on the surface, but was nervous deep down. Maisie studied her from head to toe. If she hadn't known that Sunny's son was actually a daughter, she would have never believed that the girl standing in front of her would be the legendary Mr. Southern. What an interesting girl. Seeing that Maisie was looking at her, Cameron smiled at her and said, "You're so pretty, Mrs. Goldman." Everyone was stunned and looked at her. Maisie was startled as well and chucked. "Are you praising me?" Cameron was stunned. "Is it not allowed?" Other than the 4 people in the living room, the rest of the people gasped in surprise. Maisie had heard too many compliments, but even if someone wanted to curry favor with her, they wouldn't be so straightforward and say she was pretty. What's more, Maisie was very good at taking care of herself. She looked youthful and beautiful, and many people complimented her for her good looks. However, someone of Maisie's level wouldn't take it seriously since she had heard too much about it. They would only take it as flattery. They could understand if Cameron wanted to curry favor with Maisie, but they couldn't understand why she would add a question like that. They were confident that Maisie wouldn't be happy about it. It was only now that Cameron noticed the people around her were looking at her. She squinted and wondered if she had said something wrong. Suddenly, Maisie chuckled and looked at Cameron. "Thank you for your compliment, Miss Southern. I'm really happy about it. I thought you would say I'm Daisy's elder sister." Cameron was stunned and smiled in embarrassment. "Well, you really look like her elder sister." Nolan cleared his throat and chimed in. "You guys must be tired from the trip. Come and sit." All of them took their seats on the couch, and the maid came over to serve them tea. Nolan asked Nolace and Waylon about the things that had occurred on the island. Both of them replied to him honestly, and then he looked at Cameron. "Miss Southern, please help me to express my gratitude to Mr. Southern Sr. for taking care of the children while they were on the East Islands." Chapter 2215. Cameron took a sip from the tea and nodded. "I will." Maisie sent the maid to prepare a guest room for Cameron. Just when Cameron was about to say something, Waylon chimed in. "Mom, she's not staying here." "Why?" asked Maisie. Daisy looked at Waylon and asked, "Are you going to let Cameron stay in a hotel?" "Nope." Waylon replied calmly, "She's going to stay in Emperon." Maisie seemed to have realized something and smiled, "All right then. Emperon is pretty near Taylorton. Daisy and Nolace are staying in Taylorton, so they can also take care of Cameron if she stays in Emperon." After they finished their lunch, Nolace and Waylon followed Nolan to his study room. Daisy brought Cameron to the garden. As if she remembered something, she asked meaningfully, "Cameron, are you really not going to stay here?" "Yeah. I just don't feel comfortable staying here." "You're not avoiding my eldest brother, are you?" Ever since they came down from the ship, she could sense something had happened between them. It was very apparent that Cameron was avoiding Waylon. She was stumped and turned her head sideways to look in another direction. "Of course not. I'm not avoiding him at all." Daisy clasped her hands behind her back and chuckled. "I can sense something fishy between you and my brother. I'm sure you must be avoiding him." Cameron stopped in her tracks and turned around to look at Daisy. "You're on your brother's side, right?" You also lied to me about the door number for him. I thought that was your cabin. Daisy scratched her cheek and asked, are you angry with me? I'm not that petty-minded. Let me tell you something to make it up for you. She looked at Cameron and blinked. If you stay in the Goldman mansion, my eldest brother may not be able to bully you that much since my mom is here. Cameron waved her hand and rejected it without any hesitation. No. I won't stay here as long as your brother is staying here. A hint of amusement crossed Daisy's eyes as she said, really? Anyway, I've warned you already, so don't blame me if anything happens later. Cameron did not take her words seriously. She thought Daisy was saying this because she wanted her to stay in the Goldman mansion. At night, Waylon sent Cameron to Emperon. Cameron walked into the courtyard and realized that the house was kind of new. She turned her head around. Is it here? He did not say anything. He pressed on the fingerprint scanner and entered the villa. Cameron followed behind him. She froze when she saw Waylon taking off his jacket and hanging it on the hanger. Are you not leaving? Waylon took off his watch, put it on the table, and replied indifferently, since when did I say I'm leaving? Suddenly, Cameron remembered the things that Daisy had told her this afternoon and felt like something had exploded inside her head. So, this is what Daisy was talking about. Waylon walked up to her and stood in front of her. Their shadows were overlapping with each other under the lamp. Since you don't want to stay in the Goldman mansion, you can only stay with me here. Cameron took 2 steps backward and laughed dryly. I've changed my mind. I'm going to stay in the Goldman mansion. She turned around, and just when she was reaching for the door handle, an arm came behind her and pressed against the door. Even though she did not turn her head around, she could feel the strong oppression behind her. He had enveloped her entirely in his aura, and she had nowhere to run. Waylon lifted up a strand of her hair with his finger and leaned closer to her. Even though they did not touch each other, it looked like he was flirting with her. You're the one who said you don't want to stay in the Goldman mansion, but now you want to go back there? How are you going to explain to my parents? Cameron gnashed her teeth and turned around. I have never said before that I don't want to stay. Okay, he interjected. He took a strand of her hair and put it against her lips. So, you're staying here. Chapter 2216. Upon catching this scene, Cameron's cheeks flushed instantly. She pulled her hair out of his hands immediately and combed it. You actually kissed my hair? What the hell is wrong with you? I'll kick your ass if you continue to give me such crap. Waylon sneered and stared at her. Her face obviously looked like a tomato at the moment, and it seemed that she was trying to act all tough and wanted to threaten him. She was so innocent that he could not help but want to tease and bully her. His gaze landed on her lips, and he rubbed his finger across her lips. How do you plan to beat me up, Cameron? She grabbed the hem of his collar with a fierce expression. If you dare to lay a hand or a leg on me again, I'll skin you alive. He gave off a faint smirk. Okay, then I won't move my hands or legs from now on. A warm sensation spread over her lips just as Cameron was in a daze. Her pupils constricted, and it felt like there was a torrent flowing through her entire body, which made her go completely numb. Her mind exploded abruptly, nothing was left but a blank space. Waylon paused for a bit after a short peck, held the side of her neck with his palm, and intensified the interaction. Cameron seemed to have had her breath taken away. Not only did she lose all the strength to push him away, but her whole body felt like a shell that had had its soul drained as she felt weak and powerless. The kiss continued until the two of them got separated, and she gasped. Waylon rubbed the corner of her lips with his thumb and approached her ear. I only used my lips and not my hands or legs, so it's not a violation of our agreement. Her heart was about to escape from her chest cavity through her throat, so she instantly pushed him away and dashed upstairs. She closed the door and locked it when she stepped into her room. Her body then slumped against the door and down to the floor. She had yet to return to her senses since she got kissed. I just got kissed. He actually kissed me. Cameron covered her cheeks. Her ears were flushed as well. I've never been so weak and useless. I actually got turned into a coward by a mere kiss. Wayne Goldman, that's it. You've overstepped. The next day, at the Goldman mansion, Daisy woke up early in the morning. She went downstairs and saw Nolace helping Maisie make breakfast in the kitchen. Maisie turned to look at the rabbit pastry Nolace kneaded with his hands and smiled. That's some great craftsmanship. I must say that I didn't expect you to be someone so meticulous, just like Waylon. He smiled humbly. You're flattering me. Daisy walked into the kitchen. Mom, are you guys making pastries? Maisie turned around. Yes, I'm testing your husband's cooking skills. Nolace's cooking skills aren't too bad, huh? After saying that, she was attracted by the bunny-shaped pastry that was lying on the table, and her eyes lit up. This is so adorable. She picked up the pastry and placed it in the palm of her hand. The rabbit looked lively and felt so soft in her hand that she could not bear to take a bite out of it. Nolace, is this your masterpiece? Nolace looked at her. Mom did a few of them too. The word Mom came out of his mouth abruptly and startled Maisie, who then burst into laughter. Did you just call me Mom? It's decided then, that's what you'll call me in the future. Maisie had just gotten herself another excellent and handsome son, so how could she not feel thrilled? Daisy returned to her senses. What was that? Nolace is actually quite a good candidate when it comes to pleasing and entertaining Mom. Maisie suddenly suggested, Daisy, after we've finished baking the pastries, you should bring some to the hospital for Freya. Daisy was astonished. Has Freya been hospitalized? Freya is pregnant, and her body has been under the weather all this while. She can only stay in the hospital during this time. Since you've come back, you should take some time to accompany her. Daisy thought of something and wondered. Wouldn't Colton be there? To accompany her? Maisie put the pastries into the oven. You should know Colton's temperament well enough. Things have been rather fragile between them recently, and I'm not the most suitable person to be interfering in their affairs. It's up to you guys now. Daisy thought about something and did not say anything. Chapter 2217. After the pastries were baked, Daisy packed some for Freya. And since Nolace was about to head out, he drove her to the hospital. Before she got out of the car, she turned around and kissed him on the cheek. I'll go up first. Nolace let off a faint chuckle and stroked her on the cheek. Okay. Daisy got out of the car, put on a mask and cap, and walked straight toward the hospital's entrance. Nolace watched as she walked away from the car, picked up the phone, and contacted Edison. Daisy lowered her head and avoided the crowd while finding her way to the gynecology department. She then walked toward Freya's ward, and just as she was about to push the door of the ward open, Colton came out of the ward. The two collided at the entryway. Colton frowned and was about to say something, only to realize that it was his sister. Daisy? Daisy pulled down her mask. Colton, you're here? Colton also knew that they had come back from the East Islands, so he was not surprised to see her. He responded with a hum. You stay here and accompany her for a bit. I'll go back to the company first. Without saying more, he stepped into the elevator. Daisy looked back at him as millions of thoughts flashed across her mind. There was abundant sunlight in the ward, and it was well lit. Freya sat on the chair in front of the window. She was covered with a blanket from her thighs down, and the loose pajamas could no longer hide her already bulging belly. Daisy walked up to her. Freya. Hearing her voice, Freya froze for a moment and then looked back at her. Daisy, you've returned? She walked forward with a smile and put the pastries on the table. I came back yesterday. Mom told me that you've been hospitalized, so I've come to see you. She opened the packet on the table. Have you eaten anything? Mom and Nolace made these pastries. You should really try them. Freya gave off a faint smile. Okay. After watching her taste the pastries, Daisy asked, so, how do they taste? She nodded. They're delicious. Daisy looked at her and could not help but feel that all of Freya's smiles seemed rather forced, so she hesitated for a moment and asked, "Freya, what happened between you and Colton?" Freya paused for a bit, her eyes moved, and she smiled. "Nothing much." "Why are you asking this?" She did not believe it. "Don't lie to me. Did Colton bully you again?" "It has nothing to do with him." Freya lowered her gaze. "He didn't bully me. The problem is with me." Daisy was startled. "What happened to you?" Freya's eyes were fixed on the pastries on the table. She hesitated and remained silent for a long time before letting off a faint smile. "Maybe I'm starting to regret it already." Daisy was astounded. Regret? Does she regret falling in love with Colton now? She held Freya's hand. "Freya, although I don't know what happened between you and Colton, you do love him, and he does love you too. You two love each other. That's all you need in the world that you'll need to move on, so why do you need to overthink things?" Freya looked at her. "Daisy, my past is different from yours. You should know that my background isn't perfect, and my past is like a huge stain on my body. It's my problem that I'm living under the shadow of being bound by my personal past. I want to put my past aside and stay with him without any hesitation too, but as long as Didi exists between us, it's impossible for me not to think about her." She looked out the window with a gloomy expression. "I know that Colton wouldn't mind Didi's existence. Although she's Ken's child, and I could have left her alone and moved on with my own life, at the end of the day, I'm still her guardian, so can I abandon her? Because of my mother's abuse, Didi has been greatly traumatized and has been diagnosed with psychological problems. And the only person that she can trust in this world is me. I know that Colton can accept her and even raise her, but if I were to bring Didi along into my marriage with Colton, what would the public think of Didi when we give birth to our own child and have a new family? In the public's opinion, she'll always be a girl who finds shelter under the Goldman's roof." Chapter 2218. Daisy continued. "But if the Goldmans can accept Didi..." "Daisy," Freya interrupted her calmly. "Even if the Goldmans can accept Didi, what will the public think of the Goldmans? What will the public say when they know that the future daughter-in-law of the Goldmans brought her niece along when she moved in with the family? Or, on the other hand, I, as Didi's guardian, actually abandoned her in order to get married to Colton? No matter which I choose, Colton will be the one who'll have to juggle with all the pressure in the end. I don't want to implicate Colton, and I don't want to drag the Goldmans into this mess. I'm even more afraid that the public's opinion will only make me feel that I'm not worthy of him." Freya lowered her head, and a warm teardrop fell on the back of her hand. "No matter what I do, having the best of both worlds is just not an option. It's just like what my mother said back then, as it resounds in my ears all day long like it's a nightmare. So, what right do I have to be happy?" In fact, it was just her inferiority complex messing with her mind. She felt that she was not qualified, so she sealed her heart from the world. Colton was the one who had moved her, and Didi was the one who had made her recognize reality. Daisy stood up and was about to say something when the door of the ward was suddenly pushed open. Nobody knew since when Colton came back, so perhaps he had heard what they were talking about. Freya was astounded. None of them could read the emotions on his face. "Daisy, can you please give us the room for a bit?" Daisy took a glance at Freya and left the ward in the end. The room became dead silent for a moment. Freya raised her gaze, and her voice sounded hoarse. "Have you forgotten something?" Colton hurried to her and clasped her shoulders tightly with both hands. "Freya, do you really don't want me to get implicated? And why must you care so much about the public's opinion? Do you really think that I'm not capable of handling those things, or do you think that I'm incapable of curing Didi's mental problem? I've hired the best doctor in the world for her, so what else do you want me to do?" Her pale lips moved slightly. "Is Jesse Blueman the doctor that you've hired? I'm glad that you know this." He tightened his grip. "Freya, the child that you're bearing now is one of the Goldmans, so I won't let you take it away. And if you insist on leaving, I won't even let you see the child in the future, so you'd better believe that, as I'm a man of my word." She buried her head, and her shoulders trembled. Colton, I went to the company to find you the other day. Do you know what they said about me? Do you really want to accept a woman who'll marry you along with someone else's child? How can you be sure that the woman has no ulterior motive? His gaze dimmed. When did that happen? She felt powerless. The day before I was hospitalized. I went to find you, and they told me that you had left with a woman. Colton was slightly stunned. She had been hospitalized a week ago, but he did not know that she actually went to Black Gold to look for him a week ago. He frowned. I did go out with Jessie on that day because she came to me to talk about Dee Dee's condition. She's a psychology major, so what are you suspecting? Lung? Jessie is the psychologist I hired for Dee Dee half a year ago. She knows it. Could it be that she started to care more about me and suspect me because she's heard those rumors? But this also shows that she's capable of jealousy when it comes to me. It's not that she doesn't care about me. Upon thinking of this, Colton's expression became more relaxed, and he squatted down in front of her. I know that you're being a teeny bit more sensitive because of the pregnancy, and I also know that I've been busy recently and have ignored your feelings, but can you stop treating me like this all the time? Colton leaned against her chest and caressed her bulging belly as if he was in close contact with the fetus. Since Dee Dee's incident, you've been avoiding me. Maybe you're afraid of implicating me or being assaulted by all the rumors, but you can always count on me, and I promise that I won't let those words get to you again, okay? Chapter 2219. Do you think it's because of those words that Freya did not continue, and she looked extremely depressed and sad. Otherwise, what would it be? Colton held the back of her hand. Freya, you're willing to speak your heart out when talking to Daisy. Don't you have anything to say when I'm literally here? Freya's eyes moved, and she gave off a faint smile. I have nothing else to say. Colton looked at her. There was no fluctuation of emotions in her eyes, as if she was as still as a millpond. After a long time, he got up slowly. You should grab some rest. As soon as Colton left the ward, Freya clenched her fist, fiddled with the bracelet on her wrist, and pursed her lips tightly. Ever since half a year ago, an invisible barrier seems to have risen between the both of us. He thinks that I only cared about Dee Dee and left wrathfully, and we've not seen each other for half a month since then. The decision that I made at the time was indeed an anxious one. Dee Dee's personal safety was the only thing that I thought about. Ignoring his feelings is a fact, and I can't shy away from my accountability. Even though cracks have appeared in our relationship, they're all caused by my own problem, and I can't just put all the blame on Colton. On the contrary, I'm very grateful for Colton. At least Dee Dee's injury was treated in time, and he even introduced Dee Dee to a personal psychologist, Jessie Blueman, regardless of what happened. Everything was fine at that time. I even thought that if Dee Dee's condition could be cured, I might apologize to Colton and open up to him, telling him that I didn't actually think about giving up the child in order to be with him and that I'd try to get over my childhood shadows and start anew with him. However, as soon as I was moved, Dee Dee's condition suddenly deteriorated. She even told me that as long as she was willing to harm herself, she'd be able to gain my full attention. As for the reason that caused everything to spiral out of control, I don't even dare to think about it. Everything was fine until the appearance of that text message and the gossip that shattered my confidence. A luxury coupe was parked at the entrance of an amusement park. Cameron took a glance out the window and instantly felt disgusted. I'm no child. Why did you bring me here? Waylon let off a soft chuckle. Your father said that you've never been to an amusement park, so I'm bringing you to one. She was surprised. You actually contacted my father behind my back? He unfastened his seat belt, leaned over, ran his fingers over her lips, and stared at her with his scorching gaze. Do you plan to get out of the car? Cameron was afraid that he would kiss her, so she smacked his hand off her face and got out of the car in a hurry. Seeing her flee, Waylon could not help but laugh out loud. The amusement park was crowded and boisterous. In order for her to get the full experience, Waylon did not buy out the whole park for the day and bought the tickets himself. The two of them entered the amusement park. There were various kinds of food trucks on the side of the pavement. Mascots holding colorful balloons could be seen all around the park, and groups of children were noisily gathered around the mascots, stretching their hands out and asking for the balloons. Many tourists also watched the show, and the atmosphere was lively. Cameron walked up to Waylon, looked around, seemed to have seen a shooting game, and curiously fought herself through the crowd. Waylon remembered that someone had just told him she was not a child, but she looked a lot like a child. Cameron picked up the dart in her hand. Many small balloons were hanging on the panel a few feet away from her, alongside a variety of exquisite small gifts, dolls, toys, and so on. The little boy beside her threw the dart with every fiber of his being but did not burst any of the balloons. He was about to give up when Cameron suddenly asked him, "Which of the gifts do you want?" The little boy was stunned and pointed to the toy sniper rifle hanging in the middle. "I want that, but I can't get it." Chapter 2220. "Leave it to me." The boy was doubtful. "Can you do it?" Cameron picked up the dart and aimed at the balloons. "This is as simple as ABC. Just watch." After a few seconds, she threw the dart with precision. One of the balloons popped. The boy was stunned. Even the owner was dumbfounded. "Is this beginner's luck or what?" The boy then pointed at a teddy bear. "I want that." Cameron continued with the game and threw it diagonally this time around. The dart punctured 3 balloons in a row. The boy leaped into the air happily. "Wow, you're amazing." Even the few children who were watching from the side could not hold themselves back now and started surrounding her. "We want toys too." "Okay, one by one." The owner could no longer sit still and hurried over. "Miss, if you play like this, I'll go bankrupt really soon." Cameron sneered. "It's not that I'm not paying you. Besides, you hung them up, which means they're up for grabs, aren't they?" It was well said and extremely reasonable, so the owner was at a loss for words. The owner could not help but roll his eyes. "Please, miss, I wouldn't be here arguing with you if you could pay me more. With $5, everyone gets 3 chances. But if you were to win 3 items with each throw, how could I not go bankrupt?" Waylon took out a card. "I'll pay you $15,000. All you need to do is let her play." The owner was dumbfounded for a split second. He then took a closer look at Waylon, immediately took the card from him, and asked in disbelief, "Young man, you do look quite posh. Are you sure about this?" $15,000, I can't even earn a fraction of that in a month." Waylon nodded. The owner suddenly gave off a grin and became very enthusiastic. "Okay, then you can take whatever I have in the stall today." Cameron walked up to Waylon's side and whispered, $15,000, do you really think that money grows on trees? Do you not have anywhere else to spend that money of yours? Waylon turned to look at her and raised his eyebrows. "That's why I'm asking you to help me spend my money, right?" Cameron choked on her own words, looked away hastily, and her ears flushed almost instantly. "You can cut the horseshit there." She continued to throw the darts. Every single attempt was as accurate as it could be, and soon the toys on the panel were almost gone. But the owner happily hung up new ones, and another round began. The business of this shop was not so popular before this. Now, all the children were gathered here, and even passers-by could not help but come over to watch. Cameron's divine skills were simply breathtaking. Holy shit. That woman is amazing. She hasn't missed one. If I had her skills, my girlfriend would instantly fall in love with me again. My God, she's really awesome. Waylon stared at Cameron. These skill-based games are pieces of cake to her. I don't even have to shoot. No, I have absolutely no chance at it. He shook his head helplessly, feeling that he was not worthy of her at this very moment. He also picked up a dart and threw it at the balloon that she was aiming at, bursting it a second ahead of her. Cameron was startled and turned to look at him. Are you trying to embarrass me? The corners of his lips twitched. Fancy a match? You're the one who asks for it. Cameron was pumped. Originally, she was only helping the children to earn gifts, but it had now become a duel between her and Waylon. The crowd felt as if they were here to witness an Olympic final. They did not even dare to blink from beginning to end. And the children standing at the side could no longer hold on to the toys in their arms. The piles of toys were so huge that they were even taller than some of their owners. 2 hours later, the owner's stall was literally empty, and the children went home with their hands and pockets full. Looking at his empty storage room, the owner sighed. Today was the only day where he could leave his stall unlocked through the night. This feeling of being bought out by a local aristocrat was wonderful.